Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Lots of drama to get to this morning. First of all, developments with regard to the debt ceiling. We will tell you what is likely to happen there as best as we can possibly figure as we are coming down to the wire. We also have some big developments with regard to Jeffrey Epstein and one of the banks that was happy to have his business for years and years after he'd already been convicted of being a sex criminal. So we will talk about that as well. And also Noam Chomsky caught in
Noam, my man, Noam.
I don't even know what to say about
that book
that.
might have to go, Krystal. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure we can keep that behind the set now.
Not a good look, let's just say that. Also, some really dire numbers with regards to the housing market and some overall economic news, and actually some news about just how Americans are doing, like at the core of their being, that we need to talk through as well. Whole Meghan and Harry situation in Manhattan that it's like literally the South Park episode.
I've been obsessed. The moment it came out, I said, this is fake. I'm calling them the Duke and Duchess of Smollett. You can make up your mind for yourself whether you think they're lying or not. I don't think my view is all that.
I think it's pretty clear what happened at this point. So we'll give you all those details. Also, there are some rumors about what Fox News is going to do now that they have pushed Tucker Carlson out, how they're going to reconfigure their primetime lineup. Also excited to have a political reporter in the show that we haven't had before, Shelby Talcott. She is tracking closely Ron DeSantis versus Donald Trump, so we want to get her report from the campaign trail as well.
Old friend of mine. She actually took my job, White House correspondent.
Oh, that's right.
Daily Caller before me, and now she works over at Semaphore. She's doing a very good job covering the GOP primary. That's right. And by all accounts, I mean, she's allowed to do what she needs to, and she's doing a really good job of just like beat to beat about DeSantis and Trump and all that, and so I'm excited to talk to her a little bit about that. So before we get to that, though, we just want to say thank you to everybody who watched the RFK interview. I know that so many of you enjoyed it. I guess my only regret about it is that we didn't have enough time with the man. He unfortunately had to go, but we talked to him about it afterwards, Krystal, and he wants to come back, and we've even discussed doing a town hall event or something of some kind that we can try and organize. So by all accounts, you know, we're happy with how that went, and we want to make sure that we continue to do more of these.
Oh, 100%. Yes, really enjoyed the exchange with him. I think we tried to cover as much ground as we could in the time that he had available. Obviously, he's extraordinarily busy here in D.C. So, you know, grateful to him for his time, grateful to you guys for watching, engaging with it, and also those of you who signed up as premium subs, super, super appreciate that as we are getting very close to having the new set to reveal.
Yeah, we really do appreciate all of you, and, you know, we're going to have more of these interviews. We're in the works right now, scheduling Marianne to come. We're going to grill her as well, and I think that's something we're committed to. We're going to grill every single one of them whenever they have here. And I do think in the future we're going to push for a little bit more time, though, in terms of the schedule. Because I'm just like, you know, I really don't like whenever people have to go and all of that. But we'll get to that. It's all good.
These are busy folks.
Yes.
So totally understand. And like I said, I think we got a lot of ground covered with him in the time that we had available.
Absolutely.
So super grateful for him for taking the time.
And thanks for everybody who signed up. And if you want to continue to support our ability to do that, town hall events, new sets, all of that, it's very expensive. So we appreciate you. BreakingPoints.com to become a premium subscriber today.
All right, let's get to the very latest with regard to the debt ceiling. Just as backdrop here, again, guys, we have this really weird and incredibly stupid system where Congress votes to spend money, and then weirdly they have this separate vote about whether or not they're actually going to borrow enough to pay those bills down the line. Republicans in particular have decided to use this as a point of leverage to try to get through things that they otherwise could not get passed through the Congress. And so now we are coming to a head here. By some accounts, June 1st is kind of the drop dead date. We are going to go through in a moment. If we do breach the debt ceiling, what is the potential fallout? I mean, the big takeaway is nobody really knows, but it looks like it would be really, really bad. And obviously, it is now May 18th, so we are inching very close to that deadline. Joe Biden's original consistent stance had been not going to negotiate.
Right.
Clean debt ceiling, that's all I'll accept, not going to negotiate with the hostage takers. Well, now he has gone back on what was previously a very clear position. He is, in fact, negotiating with the hostage takers, although he's trying to parse and pretend like he's not. Here is how he is framing things and what he is saying.
We're going to come together because there's no alternative to do the right thing for the country. We have to move on. And to be clear, this negotiation is about the outlines of what the budget will look like, not about whether or not we're going to, in fact, pay our debts. The leaders have all agreed we will not default. Every leader has said that.
Well,
so all have agreed We will not default.
Well, we'll see. I'm not sure I believe that, to be honest with you.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you can see how he's trying to parse here. He's trying to say, oh, we're not really negotiating on the debt ceiling. We're talking about the budget. This is all just word games. They are negotiating on the debt ceiling, something that, I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment, I think is a dramatic mistake. Because what does this mean? Even putting aside whether you think the GOP demands are good or bad or indifferent or whatever, the minute you give in to this, people, guess what? Every time this vote comes up, the whole global economy is going to be held hostage again by, whoever wants to gain an edge and get something through that they could not get through the legislative process.
Yeah, I mean, I think people need, this is also why, though, I will say, Krystal, I was actually very frustrated several months ago because I'm like, listen, you're going to negotiate. There's no question about it. Like, there is no getting around this.
But there is getting around it. Like, there are other options. There are multiple other workarounds. There's a 14th Amendment workaround where the Constitution says, like, the debt shall not be questioned. You could pursue that. You could mint the coin. There's another alternative where you can issue premium bonds. So there are other workarounds. Otherwise, God, we're just going to go back to this same dynamic year after year after year. Every time there's a Democratic president and Republicans have one or the other houses of Congress.
I meant within the framework that the Biden administration has created.
Sure.
I will say, okay, look on the 14th Amendment. So I've done a decent amount of research now, and I'm not even saying that these aren't feasible. Same with mint the coin. A lot of it actually does come down to whether the market would accept it. So I guess we could talk a little bit about that in terms of what a breach would look. But you could technically mint the coin, and even if the Federal Reserve were to accept the coin, and we let that actually is not a given. There's actually no guarantee that the markets would look at that as a genuine debt ceiling lift. So part of the problem is, so much of our feelings around debt are feelings, and they are backed not necessarily by the technical raising of the debt ceiling, but by everybody just kind of walking around and just being like, yeah, they have full faith and credit of the United States. It's good. We're cool with it. When that starts to come into question, even with the 14th Amendment, the debt ceiling, the premium bonds, as you said, that uncertainty, you're still likely looking at a crash. I mean, it's one of those where it's a very complicated situation. So I also don't want to take responsibility away from the Republicans, because I think we should all, be honest about what they are asking for. And they have decided that they want to cut spending and return spending levels to 6 months ago. When you put it that way, okay, it sounds reasonable. But one of the ways that they want to cut spending almost entirely is they don't want to touch the military budget at all. They don't want to touch any DoD spending or Ukraine spending. They don't want to touch entitlement programs. Well, you just took off the two vast portions of the entire federal expenditure. So what is left? Well, what's left are effectively, you have food stamp programs. They've talked about welfare. They've talked about rescinding some of the IRS money. I mean, personally have a problem with some of that. But they do want to rescind some of the money taken within the Inflation Reduction Act, some of which has already been spent, some future tax credits. And my other problem with it is they also don't want to raise any taxes. There are actually 10 different tax loopholes that have that could easily be closed. We've talked about each one of them on this show ad nauseum: the private equity loophole, the carried interest loophole, step-up basis loophole. There are several other corporate loopholes. None of these would ever touch anybody who is including people at this desk. It has nothing to do with small business or middle class. This is all corporate or extremely high net worth individuals, which could raise billions of dollars, and they've taken that off the table. So I want to be I want to lay out exactly what the conversation here.
I mean, in a sense, like I said, I don't really care what their demands are, because I think the whole thing is economic terrorism. And so even if what they were saying was totally reasonable, as a matter of principle, I don't think you should negotiate. But the details matter for another reason, which is that it really shows how disingenuous they are about actually caring about the debt. First of all, there is no sign in the markets that we have any sort of looming debt issue. Up until very recently, when the Fed started hiking rates, interest rates have been incredibly low. The market has been very stable in terms of Treasury bonds. Like, there's no indication out there that we have this looming debt crisis we have to deal with. That's number one. Number two, if you were genuinely concerned about the debt, guess what you would put on the table? The freaking Trump tax cuts for the top 1%. You could keep whatever little piddling, pennies they gave to like the middle class and the working class. Fine, keep that in there. Roll back the ones that dramatically benefited corporate America that they used to engage in all their stock buybacks. That added massively to our debt. That put a gigantic hole in our budget. Like, if you actually cared about these things, that would be on the table. And of course, they're not interested in that. They're not interested in a tax conversation whatsoever, because this is an ideological project. And it's specifically an ideological project to appease one part of the Republican caucus that, extracted their pound of flesh from Kevin McCarthy in order for him to get his speakership. Let's go ahead and put this next piece from Axios up on the screen that has some of these details. So they're talking about how McCarthy called Biden's bluff, as you were pointing out, Saagar, Biden being a, weak-kneed institutionalist. Unfortunately, the writing was kind of on the wall that ultimately he would cave and he would negotiate. That's exactly what is happening now. They say efforts to peel off vulnerable House Republicans failed. None openly opposed McCarthy's strategy of tying spending cuts to a debt ceiling hike. House Rules Committee Chair Tom Cole told Axios they're negotiating now, and they weren't doing it before. So again, he caved. Now, the cope here from the Biden side, and this is the politics that come into this, they say if Biden conceded to direct one-on-one negotiations, McCarthy is prepared to give ground as well. He's open to a deal that lifts the debt ceiling until 2025, beyond the next election. And there it is. I mean, that's the real trump card that the Republicans have, is they can hold out to him like, we'll make these economic problems for you go away. All you have to do is throw poor people under the bus, basically, and we'll make this go away until after the next election, so that we don't have some sort of global financial catastrophe that is going to hurt you in your reelect bid. And so that's what this comes down to.
Right, and he actually spoke a little bit about on CNBC yesterday. Let's take a listen.
And first of all, there is not going to be a tax discussion in this debt ceiling. The president admitted that yesterday at the beginning. Let's curve what we are spending, less than we spent last year. Let's go back 5 months. Let's put in things that make us grow, right? Permitting reform, cut the red tape. If you like renewable energy, be able to get the permit to do it. Build the roads. But also the other energy we talked about. Let's help people get jobs again. Let's be less dependent upon China. I think that's reasonable and sensible. But I didn't think it was reasonable that I had to wait 104 days till they finally admit they'd come into the room and negotiate.
I actually do agree with him on permitting reform. But on the rest of it, that's always the issue, which is it sounds reasonable. And then you start looking at what's actually being cut. That's why I wanted to lay it out for people. Listen, if you do care about the debt, and there are reasons that you maybe should or maybe shouldn't, and it's a multifaceted conversation, but if you would, then there are many other things that should be on the table. As he said, he doesn't want to have a tax conversation. And, most Republicans are not against raising taxes on corporations or on closing tax loopholes for the financial industry.
Most regular Republican voters.
I'm talking about actual Republican voters.
Elite electeds.
There's reams of polling on this. Republicans don't want to touch entitlements, and they don't have any problem with raising taxes on corporations, and specifically on wealthy tax loopholes that only benefit financial billionaires. There are many. This is almost where it's just turn it into a culture war thing and be like George Soros and all these other people. Let's tax them. I'd be like, okay, let's go. Yeah.
That's actually a great
idea. These ESG terrorists, which kind of true, should pay taxes. Okay, let's go. There's a lot of different ways. So this is always why I just find the conversation very difficult. And, look, in terms of the debt ceiling and all of that, as you said, I think I come back to this. I think hardcore Republicans are going to be with them no matter what. They like a fighter. They like somebody who's going to fight. The question remains, are people when they hear and understand, let's say your 401k drops by 25%, and they're like, wait, we're doing this for work reform, work requirements in the food stamp program, regardless of how you feel or not about that, do you feel enough about that to have your retirement portfolio go down by 25?
To threaten to crash the entire global economy over it?
This is another one. So let's say that last time, 2011, we didn't even go over the debt ceiling. We still had our debt downgraded. That had significant ramifications for pension funds and for T-bills, and a lot of it was erased, the problems for that, by very, very low interest rates and the zero interest rate economy. Well, we don't live in that environment anymore. So this actually could only further propel us into a recession. Now, cynically, though, this is kind of exactly what you want if you are a Republican. If you are politically and cynically, at the end of the day, Krystal, I do believe that in the short term, while it would not be good for the Republican Party, and they may suffer some cost overall, that in the net, having a worse off economy is going to be worse off for Joe Biden vis-a-vis whenever he becomes president.
An absolutely psychopathic way for them to look at this.
I
agree with you. I'm not. That's not aimed at you. That's aimed at them. I mean, that is psychopathic for them to look at it that way. But I think you're right. That is the gamble that they're taking, because they're playing with people's lives here. So in terms of the mechanics of how this is going to work, there's been a lot of happy talk in D.C. this week about, oh, they're going to come to a deal. Maybe, but there's still a long way to go before that actually comes together, because you have Democrats who are pissed off, progressives who are pissed off. Put this up on the screen from Jeff Stein. You've got a number of Senate Democrats in particular, including Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and others, who just sent a letter urging Biden to prep that 14th Amendment solution. Again, the 14th Amendment saying that the validity of the public debt of the United States shall not be questioned. Because keep in mind here, what is basically happening is Congress is sending the president two conflicting sets of instructions. One set of instructions says, spend this money, and the other says, don't do what you need to do to be able to spend this money. So the basic constitutional argument here is you've got the 14th Amendment, which says the debt shall not be questioned. Take it to the courts and let the Supreme Court make the call as to whether they want to be the ones that crash the economy. And even though the court, very partisan institution, but it's not clear that you would have all of the conservatives committed to the potential chaos that could be unleashed by taking that perspective. So progressives are pissed. You're increasingly getting strong words from them about their upset about what the White House is putting on the table, the work requirements, the fact that Biden's been open to work requirements on any of this stuff, the fact that he caved and is negotiating. You're getting an increasing upset there. So that's the Democratic side. In some ways, though, even more seriously, on the Republican side, there were some pretty stringent demands made from the furthest right part of the caucus. And it's not at all clear that whatever deal Biden and McCarthy would make would be acceptable to the entirety of the Republican caucus. So there's still, even though there was a lot of happy talk in Washington this week about, oh, we think they're getting close and we think there may be a deal, I'm still skeptical that that is really going to ultimately come together, because it's not just up. If it was just Joe Biden and Kevin McCarthy, I almost said John Boehner, my God, PTSD. If it was just Joe Biden and Kevin McCarthy, yes, I think they could probably come up with something that both of them would be comfortable with, because they're both basically institutionalists. They're both basically quote unquote moderates. But when you add in all these other factors, it makes it a lot more complicated to actually get to the finish line here. So I think, all of the sort of solutions, the workarounds, all those things are in a sense still on the table, even as I have little confidence that Joe Biden really has the spine to pursue any of them.
Yeah, my thing is, I am increasingly believe that we are going to default, at least in some name only, and that only after that will we see some sort of deal. That's part of what I was talking about. So I think June 1, the likelihood of having a deal between McCarthy and Biden, which is acceptable to Democrats in the Senate and Republicans in the House, just seems like zero. And remember this also, McCarthy has what, 20-something votes or whatever to play with? Well, it's not like they have all that many votes on the Democratic side to actually get this through. There are many Republicans who may not even vote to advance the debt ceiling deal out of Congress, out of the Senate for cloture. So you have to put that, in the Senate and think about where that comes from. But then you have the House of Representatives. Then there's a flippening where there's also a clean debt ceiling, which is on the floor for the House of Representatives, and the Democrats only need 5 Republicans to sign on for them. Yes. So I actually think there could be a likelihood that we get to June 1 and people are like, the markets crash. That's the only time, let's be honest, until Wall Street gets mad, that's not.
They don't care.
They don't care. So the markets crash, the hedge fund managers and everybody and the banks all blow up the phones. And it's certainly possible, given the discharge petition and more, that they were able to get a clean debt ceiling through because 5 moderate-ish Republicans are like, you know what, I don't want to deal with this. Let's kick it down the road for a month or something like that.
Yeah.
Then it would go to the Senate. But then there's no guarantee that the Senate, the Republicans would vote for that. So I'm looking at this on both sides, and I just see tremendous amounts of uncertainty. Is it possible? I don't know. But I don't think that the impetus for forcing negotiating power right now is there enough. There has to be a crash of some kind. for people to get serious. I don't say this with, I don't want there to be a crash, but I really don't believe that they will genuinely do anything. Both sides, right? There's no way that Elizabeth Warren and John Fetterman and all these people are going to vote for work requirements unless there's a massive crash. There's also no way that a lot of these spending people who are like, I want to cut the Department of Education, I'm not going to vote for anything until that goes through. There's no way they're going to vote unless we have a large crash either.
I mean, there's a few Republicans in the House who are like, I'm not voting for a debt ceiling increase at all.
Right, exactly.
So it just to show you like the polarity of the views here. So just to tie up this part of the conversation before we get to, all right, what could happen theoretically if we do breach the debt ceiling, especially for some kind of extended period of time. The basic paths that are available right now is they are able to strike some kind of a deal that is acceptable to enough Republicans and enough Democrats in the House and the Senate in order for it to actually get through.
Right.
That is one potential outcome, and I think we've laid out how dicey a prospect that is. There's what you were referring to, Saagar, this idea of a discharge petition, which is there is a sort of arcane legislative procedure that if you have a majority of members of the House sign on to it, you can bring something onto the floor without permission from House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. So that's where you're talking about. If you could get 5 Republicans to join with all the Democrats on a clean debt ceiling increase through a discharge petition, that is another potential alternative as you're laying out. In some ways, the bigger barrier there is the Senate because you have to get 60 votes in the Senate still for that thing to go through. So that's the discharge petition. And then you have this raft of workarounds. I think the 14th Amendment one is the one that seems to be considered most sort of seriously within the White House, even though they have expressed to Jeff Stein and others that they're very skeptical of that as well, and they're nervous about what it would mean. There are other workarounds that are sort of gimmicky, like the mint the coin and other directions they could go there. So we'll put that all in the basket of different workarounds. And at this point, I can make a case against each one of those very clearly, and it's hard for me to make an affirmative case for any one of them because they all have major risk challenges and political, uncertainty. So that's kind of where we stand with things.
No, I think you're right. I think we should just tell people, like, what's going to happen, what's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah. We rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us. And if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.